Hey, okay, so this is a video version of. Alright, I think I have the right title for this instead of Bunhead Shenanigans. It's going to be Bunhead Ramblings, because I'm known to ramble. Understatement of the year. But, yeah, so we're gonna call it Bunhead's Ramblings now. Now, I've been going through the videos from this series, and at one point I mentioned that I would do a video on King Henry VIII. I tried to do a video for something else and completely ditched it. It just wasn't happening. And yeah, rambling too much. And King Henry VIII happened to come up, so we're going to talk about King Henry VIII. Does anybody know that song? My mom used to sing it all the time, where it's like, I'm Henry VIII, I am. I'm Henry VIII, I am. I am. Yeah. I'm not going to sing it because I'm not going to make your ears bleed. And what's funny about that is then my best friend in the whole world just started singing it one day. I'm like, how popular is that song? Because, oh goodness. So yeah, if you've never heard it, I don't know if you could find it anywhere on YouTube. Of course, YouTube has everything, so it feels like. But yeah, I'll try and find it. I will post the lyrics down in the description box. So anyway, yeah, this will be a video version instead of just having having my scratchy voice. You get to see my face. Why not? We'll make it special. And but anyway, so King Henry VIII. I actually sympathize. I didn't always. When we would talk about him in history class, yeah, I thought that he was an awful son of a gun, you know? We all know about the wives and all of that and everything that he did. And he didn't kill all of them. What's funny is I remember being in middle school. It was middle school when I first learned about him. And basically, you would go down the list of his, no, some, like Jane Seymour. She sadly passed away in childbirth. And it was like, our teacher made it sound like he had basically murdered all of his wives. And it's like, no. No, he didn't. Because Catherine was sick. He just got rid of her. They basically they divorced and then she got sick and passed away. So it seems like there's a third one that he didn't. Yeah, but just. But here's the thing. So many people talk about how he's this awful, son of a gun and all. Okay, I'm not gonna censor myself. He's an asshole. And but this is the thing to understand. Um, in those days, how my teacher explained it in class, and you can of course correct and everything, is they had an heir and a spare. And I know that sounds completely vulgar, but they would have like an older male heir and then a younger, so that if anything happened to the older child, there was always a backup. I make it sound so bad, and I'm sorry, because these are human people. I don't mean for it to sound terrible. I'm trying really hard. But so Henry, of course, had an older brother. I believe his name was Arthur. And so there was Arthur, and of course, Arthur married Catherine of Aragon. And the interesting thing about Catherine is her parents were the ones that sent Columbus off. You know, they interacted with Columbus and Marco Polo, and so they were the ones that were all part of the explorer phase of all that. So, um, and a lot of people forget that. I a lot of times forget that too. Just to let you know. In fact, um, I had forgotten that until I started watching a lot of the documentaries again, and one fixated a lot on Catherine and mentioned that, and so I went down a rabbit hole and realized, oh yeah. So there's that connection there. Well, anyway, so when it came to Arthur, they were on their honeymoon, and I believe it was the honeymoon where Arthur got very sick and passed away. And so just to remember, Catherine is a Spanish princess. She didn't know a lot of English when she came over. In fact, I don't think she spoke English at all when she came. And if I remember right, and you can correct me, please do. I love having these discussions with you. Um, she, I believe here at that time, not, oh, I mean, in over there, and was it was Latin, was the speaking language. But, and so anyway, she didn't speak the language, and everything. And that's kind of how Henry VII, I mean, she had just lost her husband and everything, and so they didn't really treat her very well, because you know she's in mourning, and she wanted to go home. They wouldn't let her go home, and everything. She was sending stuff back to her parents and everything, and her parents wanted her to come back. She was finally able to go back, if I remember correctly. And at the same time, they were getting uh, King Henry VII. I'm trying to make sure I get the right number. King Henry VII and his wife, which I don't remember her name, and I apologize. I'll put it in the description box. They were making arrangements for King Henry VIII to take his brother's place. So, I mean, you know, to know that you weren't supposed to be the king, it's just, um, it has to be a punch in the gut. You know, you were in your brother's shadow. But at the same time, I guess for in that time, you know, you can't really put the modern ideals in back then, because it was already known. You knew that you weren't going to be, um, unless something happened. And as far as he knew, his brother was going to go off to battle or something. He could be an old man before he took the throne, if that. So yeah, and but to add insult to injury, or I guess just injury, not really insult, because he knew his destiny, and but they brought Catherine back, and he married his brother's widow, and now I know that it's hard for people to understand, but they didn't do anything without like God's consent or anything. They were praying like crazy. It was like they would go to church, they would pray, they would ask God, and it was like they needed to know what it does seem a little weird, but that's what they did. It's just like in ancient times when they were doing everything because of the gods. And well, now they have the one God. And that's what they did. There was the struggle between Protestant and Catholic, and you see that a lot in the Tudor era. So, but when Henry VIII did take the throne, he was he wanted to produce a male heir, and he got Mary. And well, Mary was smart. She was. I mean, Catherine was teaching her, different languages. She could speak, I think, 3 different languages is what I remember, and she was highly intelligent, highly intelligent, and and of course, from what you see, Henry was proud of her until Anne Boleyn came along. This is the whole thing about Anne Boleyn. Okay, first of all, in the court, in the king's court, people were having affairs, they were sleeping around on each other all the time. It was like the known secret. And everybody knew what they were doing. So for it to actually be a secret, like here's the thing. The king had already been sleeping with Anne's sister. And so Anne knew how to schmooze her way. What she wanted to be queen. She was going to get that. And she had figured out that the king was unhappy. He wasn't getting a male heir from Catherine. He was basically done with Catherine. He didn't want her anymore because he wasn't getting. Plus, he was a little paranoid because of the fact that there's like that whole verse. I'm sure that you've seen it in document. Those of you that have seen documentaries and everything, when you take the flesh of your brother and and everything, then you are damned, something to that effect. And so he's having a major freak out because he's sure that he's going to hell because he's married to his brother's wife. Well, he totally. First of all, I used to go to church and everything. He totally. That's not what it means. If you go to bed with the wife while the brother is alive. And yeah, when you do this whole cheating thing, then it's a problem. But the brother's gone. And I don't think the brother's really gonna have a problem with it. If your brother is giving, I mean, if you're seeing your brother's ghost somewhere saying you did it, but he wasn't. That wasn't happening. There is no documentation of Henry, seeing like with Nero. Nero was hearing voices. Henry was not. Yeah, Emperor Nero was like. So anyway, it was no secret that he was unhappy and everything else. Anne already knew about her sister having an affair with the king. So she was going to get in on that, and she was going to make sure to rise up in the ranks. She was going to make it happen. She was going to make him get rid of the queen, and she was going to take that place. So this whole attitude that, oh my gosh, they were so madly in love and everything else, they used each other. They used each other to get what they both wanted. And it backfired so bad. It blew up in their faces. This is the thing, is that they were toxic to each other and they were toxic to everyone around them. And I will proceed to prove my point. See, first of all, yes, there are lovely, and when I watched that, I watched this documentary where this woman, the host, first of all, when you're a host for something, you need to stay neutral. You don't need to push this idea that, unless there's actual solid 100% evidence of it. Oh my gosh, don't manipulate the situation. Yes, there are letters between these two people, but when you're trying to make it into a Romeo and Juliet thing, even Romeo and Juliet, they were just horny teenagers. I said it before. These two were horny for each other. That's all it was. Good lord. Did you use a DeLorean and see these two just absolutely... Ugh. My phone cut out. Anyway, so like I was saying, basically, Henry and Anne, they used each other. Anne wanted that queen position. She knew, everybody knew, that Henry was unhappy. He wanted a male heir. Catherine wasn't giving it to him, and he had he had to do something. So again, Anne Boleyn, she was smart and everything, so she was going to do everything she could to get that spot. And she did. She manipulated him. She says, now, first of all, I have seen where different people, when they read these letters, and they, it basically says that I'm not going to open my legs to you until you make me queen and all that. I don't believe that. I really don't believe, because they were going off to, they were going on vacations with each other and all of this stuff. They were having weekend, I mean, they were their secret affair was very open. Everybody knew. And there's no way. No, and then when he did everything he could to get the divorce that from Catherine, just, oh my gosh. So I don't believe at all. Maybe at first. Maybe at first she said that, and then it just got so heated that, yeah, because of the fact that when they got married, she was pregnant. So, on their wedding day, she was pregnant. Ugh. So it's like, oh yeah, I have to stay celibate. I'm not going to do anything. And it's like, oh yeah, don't overlook the fact that she was pregnant on their wedding. Okay, yeah, sure. Again, horny teenagers. Just like Romeo and Juliet. Oh, and I made that video where I'm talking about how those two basically used each other out of rebellion. Oh my lord. So now this is the thing. This is the other thing that really bugs me about people, where they're like, "Oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful love story and everything." It's like, Anne was a bitch. Anne Boleyn was a massive bitch. She, when that power went to her head, okay, and first of all, they, those two, I guess there was like that whole thing where when they got Catherine out of the castle and everything, they were wearing yellow, and there was like some symbolism to that. And then once Anne was in the castle, she was making sure that anybody who crossed her, she would have their head chopped off. And, I mean, she was just strutting her stuff all over the place. She would also tell people to physically abuse Mary and everything. And then she pushed for the whole idea that Mary was a bastard. Well, Mary never forgot that, and we'll get to that. It was awful. It just, so, and of course, but Henry was just sure that this was the woman because she was younger, not like Catherine. Catherine had gotten older, and of course, she was the cursed one because of the whole scripture thing of, sleeping with your brother's flesh or whatever it was. Totally misinterpreted, but whatever. And it was a cheating thing. Anyway. Yeah. But, oh man. Anyway. But that's the whole thing. He so wanted to please, you know, he too many words in my brain right now. They did everything spiritually. And like I said, it's hard to comprehend now that we live, as they say, in a godless world now. And but everybody did it. It was like you couldn't function without, you know, doing something for the Lord. And I'm sure people are going to be, well, notice how that worked. Look, I'm not against religion. Like I said, I grew up in the church and everything, and let people be let people believe what they want, and all that, and they're not hurting anybody. And some people get a little too into it, and but like I have, like, my own mother, she judges me on this, and it's like, you know what? I'm not doing devil worship. I don't think God cares. Devil, look, God created black, so it doesn't matter. Isn't Green Day God's favorite band? So what do you care? She hates when I say that. This is why we clash. Day in the life of me. This is why I don't go to church anymore. Because I can't have that humor. My humor is very dark. With one of my favorite movies is Life of Brian, and people hate it. And it's like, oh, good Lord. Anyway. I do. I have such a dark humor, and people are like, "You're banned from this church." I'm like, I'm fine with that. Anyway, oh, where were we? But like I said, I don't talk a lot about religion, and I'm I've said a couple of times that I am Christian. I don't push it on anybody, and I'm a chillax Christian. But one thing I will say is it does bother me when people try to preach in the comment section and, like, people are stupid if they believe in something, and it's like, you know what? Let people believe in what they want. There are people who believe a little too much in Star Wars that they will start fights over it. So you obviously believe in something. So just let people be who they want to be, And anyway, back to Henry. That's my little spiel. Anyway, and I won't edit that out. So Henry, of course, with Anne, Anne's abusing. Sorry about that. I do need to get the headphones. Anne's abusing her power. She's abusing, encouraging people to physically abuse poor Mary, telling, basically saying, you know what, we need to have her marked as a bastard, and all of this, and anybody who crosses Anne, it's like people were afraid to say or do anything, and at the same time she was saying things that were like that she should not have been saying, which later on it did bite her in the ass. So yeah, this is massive bitch behavior. And how people are like, oh my gosh, she's a wonderful woman. She's a strong woman. No, she's bitch. She's massive bitch. And this isn't good bitch. This isn't the good bitch because she's abusive. She's nasty. She's getting people killed. It's just awful. She wanted this queen position just so she could be dragon lady. Open your eyes, people. And in fact, she even manipulated him to change his religion. Well, of course he's going to do it because he's just sure that anything that he does is going to get that male heir. Well, she was having miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage. And then he saw that as a sign. Toxic behavior. See, her toxic behavior, his toxic behavior, it was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And so I kind of sympathize with him, but at the same time, once this is where it starts to shift for me. It was like I felt sorry for you, man, but now I'm having a problem with your attitude because you totally turn against your own daughter, who you were supportive of. You were proud of her. She, granted, she would have been the spare, once, and it was just part of society. We may not agree with it now, but it's how it was back then. But here's where I start to sympathize with him again. He had the jousting accident. He fell off his horse. He hit his head. He had a brain injury. It's an obvious brain injury because he was unconscious for, like, I believe it was 20 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes. They thought he was dead. Okay. And his personality snapped. Just absolutely snapped. This is where he changed into the nasty guy that he was. Now, before, he was just being led like a puppy everywhere. When Anne would tell him to do, like when she told him to make Mary a bastard, yeah, sure, okay, I'll do it because you're going to give me that male heir. He was doing it because he needed that. He needed that. I sympathize with him there because that's not easy to work. There's documentation of how he was this athletic guy. He had this beautiful athletic, he was a very handsome young man. People loved him. People would talk to him. He was a likable guy. And then that accident happened, and of course we see that famous painting of him, and he's very, very overweight, and he had like ulcers in his legs and everything, and not the athletic look that you would believe of the accounts that are told of him being younger. Not even close. And just the terrible attitude that he had. I mean, you hear about how Anne miscarried again, and they found out that it was a boy, and he just raged, absolutely raged. And so I mean, that was pretty much the point where he gave up on her, and he was already with Jane Seymour, and yeah, it was over. He was tired of it, and so he was trying to find a way out. And when the accusations came up, that's all he needed. That's absolutely all he needed. He was already gone. He was out of the country with Jane, and so he 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 was done with it. He didn't even care if those accusations were true or not. Now, I will say that those accusations should have been checked. It's not fair that she did, but you know what? During those days, even in ancient times, a lot of things weren't checked right. I mean, people got unfair. I mean, a lot of them were not checked, and I mean, there's a lot of these cases that I watch for um, from ancient times and the Middle Ages and everything, and it's like that's totally unfair. This is another one of those, and I mean, it's obvious that she didn't do those things, but he was done. He was tired of waiting for that male heir that she promised she would give him. If you remember, before they got married, she promised him that it would happen, and it never did. Well, of course, now that he's in like massive rage mode because of that brain injury, he didn't care anymore. He just absolutely did not care. So Jane Seymour gave him the son that he wanted, and I mean, and it just continues on from there until he died. Now, of course, the son, I think his name was Edward. Edward lived to be a preteen. I think he was 12 when he died, 11 or 12 when he passed away. He was very sick. And that's when he made sure that Jane Grey, because he was trying to make England Protestant. He didn't want Mary to be on the throne because she was Catholic. Again, very, very into the religious thing, and something that a lot of us don't understand now. And well, they did everything by religion, even in ancient times. And in fact, what I was talking about before with one of the murder cases that I watched for, I think it was Ramses the Third, and he was murdered. And they had this pendulum, and if it swung one way, it meant the god said yes. If it swung another way, it meant the god said these people can live. So, the people didn't do it, and they're free to go. And it's it's so interesting how they offer, as if the oracle wasn't interesting enough. These people were under hallucinogens, obvious hallucinogens. But oh, spoiler on that one. But anyway, but yeah, Edward didn't want the Catholic religion to be in England, but after he died, Lady Jane Grey, poor Lady Jane Grey, I feel so bad for her. And but what happened with her, and then of course Mary never forgot what happened to her, and that's why she's known as Bloody Mary now. And quite honestly, I don't blame her for being bitter, because she didn't get to see her mom when her mom was sick and passed away. And I mean, just everything. And it just, oh, that poor girl. And actually, the poor woman. And her husband was awful to her. And just very unhappy life. But I will say this: the Virgin Queen, one of the best rulers. I have to say that. And of course her mom is Anne Boleyn, but I'm blanking on her name right now. I can't believe I'm doing that, but but she was, and she accomplished so much in the long amount of time. And she was, of course, after she died, that was the end of the Tudor era. And but she was another one that was like, with so much that happened to her in her childhood, she was able to overcome it and accomplish so much. It's just, with Mary was physically abused. Like I said, that wasn't a love story. It was two people using each other and being toxic to everyone around them. Anne was a massive bitch in a negative way. um Henry, I sympathize with, and there's a moment where I do not. And just, it's that toxic relationship. You don't turn your back on your own child. I don't care what the situation is. You do not turn your back on your child. You do not let your significant other, your wife, whoever it is, beat the living tar out of your child. You just don't. And that's that's where I have a problem with him. I sympathize with him because of the fact that, there was Arthur, and then it was like, and I also sympathize with Catherine because of what she had to endure with all of that. It was like, she came to a country, she didn't speak the language, and it was like people were just shoving her around, and she obviously loved Arthur. He passes away, and then it's like she's just thrown into a room and nobody's talking to her. She's finally let back home, and then she's shoved into the arms of her dead husband's brother, who treats her like shit. So yeah, I feel bad for her. I feel bad for Henry, because he's trying everything to just do the right thing as a king, but he's doing it in all the wrong way. But Anne and you think about what would have happened if he and Anne had never met. It probably would have been better. Yes, he was unhappy. He was trying so hard to make, he was having affairs right and left. Doesn't excuse anything, but Anne was a bitch. She was going to be queen, and she was going to let that happen. She knew that her sister had been sleeping with the king, and she was like, well, if she can do that, I can, but I'm going to go a step further. Those kind of bitchy people exist even today. You see it all the time. So anyway, that's pretty much what I have to say about King Henry VIII. Yes, after the jousting accident, he did turn into a tyrant. But the thing is that after he died, he was not talked about as a tyrant, not for the longest time, not for hundreds of years. And I think it took, once the Tudor era was done, a couple hundred years after, it was like people started looking at the um, Tudor era and then started saying, "Oh wow, yeah, he really was an ass." It happens. When you're used to that person and you see the way the way that they rule and the way that they are and everything, you don't really think about it. And then when you go back and you look and you're like, "Oh." Oh, that happened. Yeah, it's not a fairyland romance with him and Anne. She was a bitch. I do have to say that it was unfair, the whole accusations behind her, but he had moved on. He was already with Jane Seymour. That doesn't excuse his actions. He was on a mission to get that male heir. But anyway, and a lot of his actions were because of the religion aspect. And I will say this in closing: let people believe what they want. I've seen people be very passionate about their fandoms, and you believe in that, so. So, anyway, I'm going to close it up here.